Okay, here we are. It's Sunday night, so it's Inside the Game with Coach Jim and Coach John. We've got two great guests tonight, Graham Ramsay and Erik Imler. And thanks a lot, guys, for coming on.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So I'm going to introduce Erik, and then John's going to introduce Graham. Erik is originally from Maryland, and he played at University of Virginia, where he captained the team, and they won 3 national championships out of his 4 years there. And late 80s, early 90s, great team. I saw him play a couple of times, and a great player. Then after that, Erik played professionally with DC United and a little bit with the New England Revs, and he played on the U17 national team, and later coached the U17 national team, and has coached some club soccer, and he works with Quick Goal now, and travels the country for them. And he also about 5 years ago, I came across this blog. I came across his name, and I looked at this blog. It's called Can't Pass, Can't Play, and it's fantastic. It's got great coaching points for kids. And I was just telling them how with my women's team at Thomas, we use one of them all the time because they come flying in with big long steps defensively and so on. And so small around the ball, small steps, and get small around the ball. And that's really helped. So that's a very quick intro of Erik. Erik, thanks so much for coming on. I know I only asked you a couple days ago, so really appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure, Jim. Thank you, Coach John, Coach Jim. It's an honor to be
on. Okay, so Graham Ramsay came over from Europe to North America and has been here a long time, and tremendously successful youth coach in different places, and a visiting coach as well. I think he started in Canada when he came over initially, and then ended up down in Miami, Florida. I know that Graham helped UConn with preseason when right before Jim and I played there, and just one of the best youth coaches around, and I think coached Erik on the club, which maybe you guys can expound upon. So thanks for coming, Graham, and I'm sure we can fill in the resume with it.
Graham's even older than me, and his computer crashed, so he's on the telephone with us. So the first thing we wanted to do was to ask a simple question. I'll ask Erik first. Erik, what advice would you give to a young player who wants to become a good player? And what are some of the things that you did to become such a high-level player?
I don't think it was any one thing. I think to answer the big question would definitely be to find some mentors. I think looking back on my journey, the game I think was a bit young in the U.S., and you look at players now, getting into Europe and having a ton of success, and getting into massive clubs and just doing really, really well. My first foray into Europe was through Graham. So many of my exploits after playing at the collegiate level were through Graham. And just to get over to Europe and to land somewhere and have an opportunity in a club to give it a go. The timing wasn't right for me. I was coming off an injury and trying to make it work, and it wasn't the fit. It wasn't the right time. But to answer your question, Jim, just to have a mentor, to have someone who can look up to, can guide you. You can look at what they've done and kind of model your journey after what you've seen them do. I think is vitally important. And I feel like in my time there weren't a whole lot of guys that I could look to that were friends of mine, were peers, were guys that were my age that I could say, oh, I want to do that. Look at how he did it. I want to do it that way. It was just kind of uncharted waters at the time. So,
Yeah.
So Graham, maybe you can talk a little about the evolution of what you've seen with young, good United States players. I'm sure, like Erik said, it was harder in the 70s and 80s, and maybe a little easier now with the sort of maturity of the game in the US. But the same sort of question, and maybe you could say, what did you used to tell players quite a while ago, and what are you telling players now as far as the ones that really have an ambition to become great players as they get older?
Yeah, well, I think it's harder now in lots of respects. If I was a young player with some talent, I'd go to Europe and then find a good club in Europe. I mean, the boy who's at Juventus now is doing really well, American boy, and also one at Chelsea, Pulisic.
Yeah.
I just don't think the system here is strong enough or good enough, sadly, and it's gone sideways. And I relate this story all the time. When we were in the ESL, mainly because of Bill Wilson, who was the commissioner, who was a very good player. I mean, he was captain of Wales, captain of Aston Villa. He was a top-class player, and a top-class coach as well. I got to know him really well. And his desire was to bring over really top-class coaches to this country and plant them all over the place. Like Tony Waiters was in Vancouver, and Hennis Weisweiler was in New York, and on and on and on it goes. Great coaches. Magnus Nichols, the great Dutch coach that came over. But all those people that came over, and so they planted real roots to the game and what was needed to promote the game. And that's pretty lacking now. I'm not knocking the American coaches that are in the MLS, but
Hello. Yeah.
Anybody there?
yeah, we're here, Graham.
We're
Yeah, we're here.
Okay. But what Wilson did was bring over about a dozen world-class coaches and planted them in all these clubs. And they had a big impact. They had a big impact on the game. And unfortunately, I don't see, as much as I don't see American coaches coach, I don't see many of them there other than surviving with a club, which is sad to say. Also, again, this is just a personal opinion, I think there's too many foreign players in the league. You know, I want American boys or girls playing more than anybody else. I don't mind one or two foreign players, but you switch on TV today and a team comes out and they're mainly Hispanic, which I don't know against them. They're blamed for coming here. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not helping the development of our players, which I'm concerned about. So that's my part of go.
all right. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Graham. Erik, you've had experience coaching at the national team level, and now you're coaching younger kids, correct?
Yeah, they're 9 and 10-year-olds.
Yeah. What kind of things do you feel the 9 and 10-year-olds need to have? But like when they leave you to move on, what do you want them to have in their toolkit?
Well, I've gone through bit of a, when I was younger coaching, it was more about, it was a lot of technique. And I feel like I kind of followed the U.S. soccer model. Look, let's teach him to be comfortable on the ball, and let's hammer the technique, which I think is still very, very important. But these days, I'm more about decision making. I'm more about how they see the game, how they see the pictures, how they solve the problems. I don't spend any time really doing mechanical, technical work that's repetitive. Most of my time is spent playing games and seeing if they can solve a problem, whether it's a 1 versus 1 problem or whether it's a 5 versus 3 problem, whatever the numbers are. Can they solve the problem? And hopefully the technique of passing and receiving is enough work is done within the game we're playing, and I don't have to isolate it into a specific 10-minute exercise that doesn't have any kind of
context.
Look, how are you going to deal with pressure? How are you going to deal with an opponent? So I'm just trying to put players in those types of situations as much as possible. What I still struggle with in my coaching is, are those players coming along far enough in their technical development in the year that I have them, or in the 2 years that I have them? So I still constantly critiquing myself as to whether I'm giving them enough of that and maybe too much of the decision making. Because when I look around, I'm looking at a ton of coaches who are doing the opposite, right? They're doing a ton of technical work and technical exercises and isolated activities where I'm not. So I hope that I'm on the right path. They just need more of it. But I always question it because I have players for maybe a year and then I have to pass them on.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Erik. Graham, I'm just going to share this, then turn it over to Graham for a second. Graham sent me I think it was a flyer that he had sent out for a camp for quite a while ago. And he talked about a little bit about Ajax and a little bit about this camp. You're going to play 3 times as much as you would at any other camp in the U.S. And you're going to learn, you're going to have to make, solve these problems. So Graham, can you expound on that a little bit?
Yes, lovely. I just think the game is too regimented and too dictatorial. Somebody's telling a player what to do all the time. And so we don't have a player that's got any real personality. If you look at our game, a professional game, there's no strong personalities. And you can ask yourself why. And it's mainly because the parents, for the most part, have dominated the environment of the child. Anyway, the purpose of the camps that I run is called a players' camp. And I put the players into predicaments whereby they can learn to solve problems. But they don't learn to solve them. I will help them. And initially a bit more than I should, but then clear it up to where I'm out of it. Because the game is going to come from players. If you look at every great player, they have zero coaching as children. And look at the recent one, Maradona just died. And he never knew a professional coach till he was 15, 16 years of age. It didn't seem to hurt him too much. And I just think that we need to learn to free the game up to the players. One of the big things I try to do is let a team organise itself. It could be generally it's what we call 5v5 type of games. Let them organise themselves and then allow them one time out each half Well, whatever the biggest problem is, they try and solve it. And so I try and put it onto the players more. And I think this is really, really important because as I look at where I live on the East Shore of Maryland, I go and watch games, college games, high school games, and it's the coach and the coach and parents dictating every move of the child. Well, you only produce morons, you don't produce players, and that's where we are with this environment that we've created. It's not very smart. And as I say, we have yet to produce a truly world-class player. The game has been going here on in this country in a professional format since 1967. And to say we haven't produced a great player, to me, is sad. You know, we do everything else. We've thrown money at it, we've thrown camps at it, we've got everything. But they're missing the ingredients by which we find out where a player comes from. Even if I was at a club, I was talking to a couple of people the other day about this. Most clubs are too parent-dominated environments. They can't tell the players what to do, when to do it, and everything else. And what needs to happen, but I learned this in my own way when I was 13, 14, playing for a school team in England. And we got to a final, we were the hot team and all this stuff, and we lost 3-1. We were devastated. And we got together next day, the players got together, and we organised our own 4-a-side, 5-a-side league. And we ran it. And we argued and bitched with each other, but we ran it. But it made us think about what we were doing, how to organise, how to even line the pitches, you know, and all these simple things that kids don't have nothing to do with the game today. But what it taught you was that you got to have to manage the game. I mean, we used to have to travel by bus, by public transport, and all these type of things. But it made us recognise the importance of needing each other to make it work. And that's what's sorely lacking, I feel, today.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. I'm going to take a quick break. I got a question for Erik that came in, and it doesn't have anything to do with what we just talked about, but it's from Dave Latourette. He was the goalkeeper coach at University of Hartford in 1991, and he wants to know if you remember the 4 overtime game against them.
Yes, I definitely remember that. The details, no, but being in the game, yes. Feeling like it was going to end at any second. Not being too used to losing and how it might feel being eliminated in a big match like that. So yes, I do remember. I do remember some details of that game, but to walk out, being able to advance, that was the biggest memory of it.
Thank you. I know I took over the Hartford team after Sasha went to Maryland, and they were still talking about that 2 years later, you know, how, I'm friends with the goalkeeper. I guess their goalkeeper, George Costellas, made like, you know, a world record number of saves in that game.
George is a great guy. I consider him a friend.
Yes, he is. Okay, John.
Yeah, it's just, I wanted to comment that I think what Erik was saying about his current coaching style and what Graham was talking about with player sort of directed practices is what I believe in too. I feel like I coached high school kids, so they were mainly 14 to 17-year-olds. And I didn't think there was any better efficient use of practice time than setting up a lot of small-sided games under different conditions and different size fields. And really, you're getting the technical work at the same time that your practice conditions are really game realistic. And it it seems like, a lot of people have been doing that the same way for quite a while. And I think it's the best method. I haven't coached like 6 to 10-year-olds, and it may be a little different there, but that 14 to 17-year-old group, it seemed like that was the most productive way to design a practice. Yeah.
Well, on that point, John, I feel like so many times you get into conversations talking about methodologies and how you go about, what you feel is important in terms of your curriculum or how you're training it. I think all of those conversations sound, you get into a room with 3, 4, 5, 10 people, whatever it is. I think a lot of people would say the things that are pleasing to the ear. I think everybody would agree in how we sort of see the game for the most part. Obviously, there's a few differences, but I feel like the conversations that we have are, they're all pretty cohesive. We're all kind of saying the same things. But the thing that fascinates me is when you go see it put into practice. So you go out to the fields and you actually watch a training session. You look at that coach who just said all the things that you would say, basically verbatim, but then you go watch their training session and you're just like, that's not what we talked about. That's not what you're saying. You've got them in lines. You've got them doing repetitious technical work, right? So this is where I struggle a little bit, right? Because I've been in so many situations where the conversation is it all sounds good. Everybody's saying the right thing, but are they doing what they're saying? And most of the times I find that that's not the case.
Yeah.
That's interesting, Erik. One of the things that the guys talked about last week, we had Billy Gazonis and Franz Innocent on, and they were in the mid 70s. They were 2 of the very best college players on 2 of the best teams, and they both became professional players afterwards. Both of them talked about how much time they spent themselves on ball mastery, not with a team, but themselves. And that, they played a lot of pickup games. Franz never played in a game with refs in uniforms till he was 15 years old. And I'll tell you, when he was in college, he was, first team All-American, the whole bit. I think that we miss back in the olden days, kids went to the team practices, but they also played all the time in their neighborhoods, in their backyards. And they got ball mastery that way, and they made tons of decisions that way. And so, I think a lot of coaches probably feel like, hey, if I only have this kid twice a week, I better give him some of this technical work too, because I know he's not doing it. I'm not saying he's right. I'm just saying I think that might be some of the thinking there.
Well, sorry to interrupt there, but how many youth coaches out there who have their players twice a week for an hour and a half, feel completely responsible for that player's development, completely responsible. The fact of the matter is that a majority, not all, but a majority of these kids are doing absolutely nothing other than the 2 days of the week it's required for him or her to be there. And, to Graham's point, you wonder why we haven't created a player. Well, we all know that a player is not created on 2 days a week in a club environment. That's not where it's done, right? It's all that time outside of that environment where a majority of that work is done. And I just know that I have to imagine that a large majority of players are doing next to nothing other than the few days of the week that it's required. And, with that, we're not going to get very far.
No. Can I add to that? When I was section coaching for Maryland, I used to bring in 3 or 4 international coaches into Maryland every summer. One of them, Peter Bundy, who was assistant World Cup coach for Denmark, Is somewhere in Europe at the moment. He heard about this. We had this camp for coaches and players, and he heard this thing about a soccerplex. He said, "What's this, Graham? What's a soccerplex?" I said, "It's a place with about 15 soccer pitches. It's beautiful." I said, "It's pretty neat." He said, "Can we go there on the way back at the end of the week?" I said, "Yeah." So we drive back down on the Friday afternoon. We drive into a soccerplex outside of DC, and he said, "Can I speak to the people that run it?" I said, "By all means." So go in and introduce themselves, and he said, he turns around to the people who manage this place. He said, "Can I tell you something? What you're doing is a total waste of time." He said, "I hate to be so blunt about it." He said, "We've looked at this for 20, 30 years in Holland, and we've replicated the decision that the game is going to come from kids who can walk to the pitch and play. Because when they're walking, they're talking about a game, and they're getting prepared to play." And he said, "This place will never produce a player." Unfortunately, he's right. And it got me thinking into all sorts of things to do with this. And I've had the good fortune to travel to a lot of different places. And one of my favourite places is Brazil. And this is my wife and I were on vacation in northern Brazil. And I was asking at the hotel, "Where do you find kids kicking around?" He said, "Well, get on the beach." So we go down to the beach, and about 200 kids, and they're all arguing and bitching, typical teenagers and youngsters. And so they get organised into teams, and they did it themselves. It might be a bit protracted, and he would drive most adults down the bend, because it took about 20 minutes to get their team organised and all that stuff. But the important thing was they organised it, they played it, and they played with an incredible amount of passion. And anyway, at the end of an hour and a half, it wound up. And so I said, "What are you kids going to do now? You're going home?" And some were going home, some had enough. The whole group of them said, "We're going down to play down the road." So they walked about half a mile down the road. There's a big traffic island. And what they've done is took over this traffic island and played Kirby 4 for another hour or so. But it is totally child-dominated. And that's why they produce players. There's no secret to it. That's the environment we need to create.
Thanks, Graham.
Yeah.
So, Erik, what advice would you give to a young coach who, not a parent coach necessarily, but a young coach who maybe wants to make a career out of it, wants to move up to a higher level?
Does it have to be one thing?
No.
I don't think it's a whole lot different than what I tell a player. Your other guest on the other end of the line was a massive inspiration for me. As a player and now as a coach. You referenced my blog, Can't Pass, Can't Play, and all the little sayings that come from that. They aren't my creation. Right. I learned all that from your other guest on the line. I mean, so many of the things that I've done as a coach, the way I see the game, the way I've behaved in the game, my pursuits, everything have been heavily influenced by Graham Ramsay. I mean, he was my mentor. I played for a lot of very good coaches in my time, and Graham was, I hold him up there as one of the best. I learned a great deal. So to answer your question, I'd say, find a mentor, somebody that you can you can observe what they've done. You know, you can ask them specific questions. You can watch their work and mimic it. You need that. And I had that in Graham. I had that in other coaches. You know, take a little bit from here, from this person and that person, and kind of find your own way. But my path is heavily guided by my experiences with Graham.
Excellent.
So Graham, going way back, like what were some of your influences when you were a player that sort of started you on this path toward being a professional coach? You know what I mean?
Well, I was a player. You know, I wanted to be a player big time.
Yeah.
And I found out when I was 17 that probably I wasn't going to be the player I wanted to be. I'd been a pro and in a great club called Hampton Wanderers, and with a lot of great people. I felt the education I got from there was brilliant. You know, you couldn't buy it. And I got into coaching, and I belonged to a brilliant coaches association with a guy that influenced Bobby Robson a lot and Dan Howe a lot. We've been the two great coaches in England. And so I was around these people all the time, and then I can't underestimate the learning I got from these guys. They were brilliant, and so I went to a lot of games with them. I played for this one guy, George Taylor, who was a friend of Bobby Robson, and you know, it's like, again, education, you get deeper and deeper. And I got into coaching, and I went to courses out with Alan Wade, director of coaching training at FA, and all these people. And it's just building blocks of knowledge all the time. And you know, bit by bit, you know, it builds a picture in. And, but I think, yeah, players need to get out and learn. When I had Coach Erik, the thing I wanted to take them was abroad. And so, by sheer luck, because I worked at Aston Villa for several years, coached at Aston Villa for several years, and I found out, or I got contacted by a friend of mine at Aston Villa saying, well, there's a tournament in Ramsay, southern Germany. The Villa declined the invitation to play in it. So let me see if I can take that invitation up. I need to phone people. So that night I phoned people back in the US, I was in England at the time. I said, yeah, we'd love to have an American team. And so I took Erik and a team to Ramsay in southern Germany. It was a great experience. And then we played in Zurich. And then we went and played in London. But we played against good teams all the way through. They weren't junky teams. So it's all part of the education. I just find that when I see these tours and so on, a lot of them are shams. And I feel for the players and for the people who spend a lot of money getting ripped off. And you know, but that's where we are with it, I'm afraid. It needs a lot of work.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it's interesting that, you know, we've been doing this show here for about a month every Sunday night, and it always comes back to me. It always comes back to the same thing, and that is that players have to put the time in, and they're obsessed and they have fun with doing that. And it's a lot more than the couple sessions in the week. And that, you know, there are a lot of players that do that. Something that Billy said last week, Billy Gazonis, it was a I had read this quote from Cruyff. Cruyff is my man. You know, I happened to be playing in Holland in '72 when Ajax was European champions, and I got to see them play, and I couldn't believe my eyes, you know. So I love Dutch football, and I love Ajax because of the way they develop players. And Cruyff said, "Do you think I got this good by playing 4 hours a week at the club or 4 hours every day out in the street?" And then one other thing that came to mind was there was a time in the early '80s when Holland, for them, wasn't good. You know, they had a few tough years, and they all got together and they realized, well, the kids aren't playing pickup. There's too many cars in the street. The kids can't play in the street anymore. So what they did was a lot of the clubs decided to open up their facilities to kids so they could come and play pickup games, you know, at the grounds. And they felt that helped to get them back on track. So, yeah.
That's why anywhere you go, you go by the greats of the game, like Maradona or Cruyff, Pelé, whoever it might be. And they all have the same background. I mean, they played the game as kids. They just freelanced it. And so there's a vibrant imagination of what the game's all about. And that transfers into talent. And that's what we need to foster a lot more of. I just think there are a lot of potential players, and we cut them off at the knees by the system that we've evolved. It needs, the federation needs shooting, to be truthful. It needs total reorganisation at the bottom of the game, because it is too structured, and while it stays as it is, we'll just go for it, and we'll see all these thousands of kids drop out the game when they're 14 years of age, which is a tragedy. But somewhere along the line, another sport's going to pick them up and take good care of them. And we don't have a right to that child. And so we need to be a lot more thoughtful about how we develop talent. At the moment, I think clubs are poorly organised. I see it all the time. I mean, I've advised a couple of clubs, and I go in and sit everybody down. I say, I'm going to talk to everybody, not just the coaches, stuff like that, but the people who run the club. Because you're the people that make it happen. And you need to know what you're doing. Because at the moment you don't, unfortunately. You think you do, but you don't. Because you haven't produced any talent. Well, my best friend is saying, you're as good as the talent that falls from the tree. The fruit that falls from the tree. Well, that trees are there. So it's not worked. So we got to come up with different perspectives of how we can change that. And I feel we need to do a lot more work in schools. I started a project, if I ever get computer working again, which drives me nuts. What I want to do is, I've got a book on the go about this, because I think this is one of the good needs, is to get kids more involved in organising their own game at school. And it's all terrible. And but we've come through a system where we've got glued into it, but it's not working. If it worked, we'd produce players. When we have to find out about an American player becoming a good player, it's a Juventus. We want that good player to develop in Maryland or Arizona, where it might be. We just got so much to learn, and I just think I could talk about this now, so I'll drop off and let Erik have a go.
Well, Eric, you certainly had a lot of good players at Virginia in those years. So it's not like we haven't had good players in this country for, quite a while, actually. You guys had quite the collection there in the late 80s, right?
Yeah, no, I was the lucky one in those 4 years to play with some of those players, be on the same field as those players. It was an honor for sure.
So just a couple things I want to add. Anyone out there who's who's coaching a team and they want their team to really get better in a hurry, get in touch with Graham, and he'll come, and I've seen him do it. He'll take your team, and within a couple hours, they'll be better. And he travels around. One of the teams he's helped, one of the college programs was the Smith College women, who weren't much, and with his help, they became a national power and won a few championships. And also for any coaches out there as well, the blog that Erik does, Can't Pass, Can't Play. Every time I read it, it's got some nugget that really helps. And I guess from what I just found out tonight, he got a lot of those nuggets from Graham too. And that's what we do. We steal from each other, we learn from each other. And also Quick Goal. Quick Goal's done a great job. They've got quality equipment, all types of equipment now, not just goals. And so we always want to plug the people that are on here. They're excellent in what they do. And, that's why they're on here, because we've asked them, because we've seen their excellence. So, Erik, do you want to close with anything?
Oh, geez, put me on the spot there. Yeah, no, I don't really have anything to close with. I mean, every conversation we get into, there's something to pull from it. I enjoy being a part of it. So all I really want to say is thank you to both you and Coach John for having me on as a guest, and to bring me on with Graham. I think the tie there with how I played for Graham and how influential he was in my career as a player and as a coach is a great tie-in. So thank you both for having me on.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Graham?
Yes, I was just going to say, I feel very lucky to coach a player like Erik. He has a joy to coach. And even though he comes from Bowie, Maryland, he can't have everything. But no, I just think I'm still very involved in coaching. Ajax way is a way I live. And I had the good fortune for a decade of bringing Dutch coaches into Maryland who were really top-class coaches. And so I learned a lot from them. And just recently, a friend of mine is now coaching in Man City, and he's been sending me stuff on coaching, which has been really neat. And a lot of it is Ajax-based stuff. So, I'm still very involved. I love to coach. I've coached in Hawaii and God knows where. I'm still willing to coach wherever the good Lord takes me. And thank you very much for doing this program.
Okay, well, appreciate having you both on. John?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm all set. It's nice listening to both of you. So thank you.
Okay, we're going to wrap it up. And again, thanks so much, you guys. This show is it's new ground for us, and we've been really fortunate to have fantastic guests on. And that's the plan every week, just to do that. So thanks again for coming on.
Pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye. Yeah.
Thank you.